We call this the Infinite Consciousness Conference, and we're going to be talking about some incredible, inspiring things. People who've had near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and what that really means for us all. And we've got two of the world experts on these subjects. We're very delighted to welcome Eben and Raymond Moody this morning. We're going to be talking for us. And I know you're going to really, really enjoy their presentations. You're going to learn a lot. So without further ado, we'll get started, and I'll hand over to Professor Laszlo, who will give you a few words. Over to you.
Thank you, Joe, very much. And thank you and welcome again to all of you. I just want to say a few words. I want to say how very topical, and I think to my mind, it is important is the argument, the topic of this meeting. We all know what happened 2 days ago in France, and you know that this is not a unique, separate event. It is something that is symptomatic of our times. And I'm just wondering, what if the conviction that we share here, that I'm sure you'll all be sharing by the time this conference is done, it will be more widespread in the world. Maybe that if we knew that our consciousness doesn't end with the life of our brain, and that we are connected through our consciousness, maybe we will behave differently. Maybe this world will be a different world. We know already that in many parts of the world where reincarnation is accepted fact, there is not such violence as in many other places, most other places. We are somehow trying to squeeze out everything that we can, all the benefits for ourselves as a separate ego based on our body and our brain. And you know that when that is gone, then everything is gone, and in the meanwhile try to get the most out of it. And that is among the many reasons why we have violent world and such a disbalanced world, creating such tremendous gaps between the haves and the have-nots, between the powerful and the powerless. It is a very short-sighted world. Sometimes I think that we have evolved our consciousness to the point where we are aware of ourselves. But we are not evolved our consciousness yet to the point where we are aware that what we are is not a separate thing. That what we are is not just a biological organism that is generating, like a turbine generating electricity, generating some sensations which we call consciousness, but that we are a carrier of something which is in the world, which is an intelligence, a consciousness, and that we are part of that, and we are all part of it together. I think every animal knows that. Every other species that hasn't developed the consciousness that to that point that we have, and not further. So if you have got to this point, I think the next point would have to be that we move on to think, what are we really if we are not just a brain and a body that is secreting in some sense sensations while the neurons are firing, while the cells are still interacting. What if we are something more than that? And what if the whole world is more than that? As you know, this center, this institute is dedicated to research on the new paradigm. The new paradigm is intended to be a holistic paradigm, a way of thinking, a way of approaching our questions, the big questions. Who are we? What is the world? What is the meaning of existence? These big questions that were handed over to philosophers and to spiritual people, to religions and so on, and can now be brought back, if not fully understood, not fully answered, because science, we can never answer everything fully, but we can get a good grasp of what the fundamental these questions mean by looking at how the new physics evolves, the new biology, the new ecology, the new cosmology. All of these things shed light on the nature of the world, and shed light on who we are in this world. Not separate little material things floating around temporarily and then disappear, but part of the whole symphony of evolution that is intelligence, that has an intelligence underlying it, as Schrödinger and Planck and Paul and Einstein, and the great scientists have always underlined, that it cannot, this is not a chance, random universe. It is something which is informed, to use David Bohm's term, informed by consciousness. This you will find out more about during the course of this video conference. I leave them to our speakers, world authorities on this topic. And I'm absolutely delighted to have been able to bring them together here. And I think you have a mind-altering experience. And if you go out, please help to alter the minds of other people around you also. Because the kind of convictions, the kind of insights that I think will generate during these 2 days, I think are kind of insights that we need in the world if you make this a more peaceful, more cooperative, more harmonious world. So without further ado, I'll hand it back to our Master of Ceremonies, Joe. I just want to welcome you again. Thank you for coming, and let's enjoy the new insights, the old insights we discovered together.
We had near-death experiences of one sort or another. This idea that one re-experiences realities that one has experienced, but understands or knows or feels the feelings of all the other people you were involved with while you were having it. I mean, how can you possibly know that that is the case?
How can you know whether that's the case? That's a great question. You must be in philosophy or something. But how can you possibly know the case and that's the case? And that is the operative question. However, that's why I said, at least for some of us, because what I can know is that lots of patients who almost died come back and talk about this experience. And it's something that is, recorded even from very ancient times. And so the experience is for the people to whom this happens, I accept that they had that experience. Now I know from the point of view of a strict logician, you can't really make that inference. But here is the problem I have with this whole thing, and that is that I have a lot of medical doctor friends who have had profound near-death experiences, okay? Eben, our mutual friend Rajesh Parti, who was chief of anesthesiology at the Bakersfield, California Heart Hospital, Dr. Anthony Sikoria, professor of physiology and neurosurgery at some university in New York. I have lots and lots of friends who've had near-death experiences. And I'm trying to think of myself, for example. If, heaven forbid, something happened to my foot, it's essential for me to walk with it, okay? So to me, the idea that something could happen to my foot is pretty horrifying. So I asked myself, if something happened to my foot, would I go to Dr. Sikoria? And I said yes. If I needed surgery, would I go to my friend Eben? Absolutely yes. So how is it that I can accept their medical judgment to the point where I would put my life in their hands? And yet, unanimously, they tell me that I went to this other world that's more real than this, and it's real. So, given that there's no strictly logical procedure to make up your mind, it's like I got to go by the balance of considerations, is what I'm talking about. And then once we get to this point, that lots of people will tell you that they reviewed each action of their life through the lens of that other person, that they empathically identified with the person with whom they interacted, and were the same person. Well, in terms of, for example, the notion of the actual infinity or the metaphysical infinity, you can sort of think in your mind that, well, now just a moment, at this one point, I was that other person, okay? And what it does, it sets up an infinitely reverberating connection, because those people are equated to other new people that you didn't know. See? So it does create a sort of actual infinity or metaphysical infinity there, once you think about it, which gets translated into this thing we all hear so often about we're all one. Well, it's become almost a slogan or a chant or whatever. But in a way, I can see, through thinking about this panorama of your life, where you see that you're sort of connected with all other people, as a kind of metaphysical infinity. In metaphysical infinity, the limit is not imposed from without. It's imposed from within. So the idea is that the metaphysically infinite is self-determining, creates its own limits. The mathematical infinity puts the limit on the outside rather than the inside. Because what you're saying when something is mathematically infinite, you're saying no matter how you count how high you count up, there's always going to be a potential for a further count. So, I don't know, but that's my thinking.
Society and worldview and understanding of the nature of reality is this disease of super specialization. And the super specialists are, the ones we go for, the experts. In our modern world, we tend to default to scientists as being the experts and the ones that whose opinion we would seek. And yet, for example, for much of my life, I thought, well, the most fundamental science about the nature of reality is physics. But of course, you've got to realize the problem is the physicist is looking at the physical world. And if that's all there is, fine. But if there's much more to this world than just the physical, and of course, that's where the insanity of the hard problem of consciousness, or the impossible problem, really comes to a fore. When you realize that those experts, when pressed, who basically have an underlying assumption that the physical brain must create consciousness because they believe the physical is all that exists, it's no wonder they run into such an absolute problem, because that's not the way it works. And I would say that really the best thing here is to open our field of view as much as possible. I came back from my journey realizing, as Descartes said, if you would consider yourself a true seeker, you have to, at least once in your life, doubt everything you've ever thought to be true. And that's really what so much of this is about, because our culture is so kind of bought into some simplistic ideas that come from these various specialist fields, including scientific materialists, and also including religions. In fact, I would say that's no surprise to anyone that some of the greatest tragedy in our current world is that the original messages of the prophets have been so badly distorted by those who use language to kind of shape up a framework that's not really reflecting what the original prophets were trying to tell us. So that's really so much of what I think is the current effort, is to rise above this false sense of separation. And that's where I believe that the meditation is so powerful, because in deep meditation, we can come to know that oneness, come to know the unity of consciousness in a very direct and real sense, very much like people who've had any kind of spiritually transformative experiences, certainly near-death experiences are one category, where you can come to take a more global view. But really, given that the only thing anyone has ever come to know is the inside of their own consciousness, that is clearly a starting point to come to any kind of understanding of the nature of reality. And it's very much a mission of rising above that false sense of separation, those dogmatic differences. And again, our language is right there at the core of the problem. That's why I love telling that story of Jill Bolte Taylor, and how just by getting rid of her linguistic brain in the false sense of separation, she came to see a much richer truth of oneness and of connectedness. And in fact, when I read that story, I was busy contemplating the collapse of the wave function in the quantum mechanical system and kind of following a photon striking the retina and the pathways back to the brain. Where does the collapse of the wave function happen? And coming to realize that it occurs outside of the physical universe. It's outside of our four-dimensional space-time. That's where all experience and memory resides. And yet our current viewpoint is one that is so limited, just like Stephen Hawking was forced to say back in 2010, maybe we got to settle for multiple theories of everything. Any of this kind of dogmatic thinking puts us into a corner of the closet and does not allow us. It's really through experience and through broadening our awareness and questioning everything that we can come to any kind of semblance of something that fits together to make sense. And it's all about rising above that false sense of separation that is so inherent in our modern thinking.
I just wanted to comment on just that one these two gentlemen were saying. This is precisely the reason why we have created this institute. And why we are having these discussions, these debates, examining the big questions without outside of the box of the established wisdom, beyond the disciplinary boundaries. Because there is some place where you need to do this seriously, where you have to be able to ask big questions and have well-reasoned answers, but not with the old rationality. I'm reminded of the saying by Einstein. He said, "What is it that you want?" He said, "We seek the simplest possible scheme that can tie together the absurd facts." Now, what people have in mainstream science is tying together the absurd facts that have been excluding this phenomenon. Now, what happens? What kind of scheme can we come up with when we include this phenomenon? So there is consciousness beyond the brain. When there is an infinite consciousness, there's life after life. I prefer to call it in this sense, talk about consciousness as being beyond the brain, because the brain is life, and what survives is not life itself, but what survives is consciousness. Because consciousness is not just what is produced by the brain, as you can say.
And what I came to realize in this whole effort is that, and of course this is really true for all of us, so it's not like this is some great revelation, but I came to realize that a lot of what I was going through in terms of my personal journey of understanding is being mirrored by what humanity is going through over at least the last 4,000 years or so of human development, of civilization, evolution, and understanding about the nature of reality. And I think it's important to point out, to kind of set the context, that in that great swath of development and of understanding, the 400 years of the rise, the scientific revolution of seeking natural laws to try and understand the workings of the universe, I would say is really a turbulent adolescence. So we are not to look at the rise of scientific materialism as kind of the pathway towards the future, but it was kind of the kind of trying and the trials and tribulations of growing up. But to think that the materialist model is in any way going to satisfy our understanding of the nature of reality is false. And in fact, I would say that that reigning paradigm of current scientific materialism, within the next decade, I would say, will go the path of such thinking as, oh, the earth is flat. Oh, the sun goes around the earth. Well, likewise, to think that the physical is all that there is, and that somehow the physical brain creates consciousness out of purely physical matter is going the same way. That is something that within scientific and philosophical circles is known as the hard problem of consciousness. I would say essentially that the hard problem really should be called the impossible problem of consciousness if you are a pure physicalist and think the only thing that exists is the physical world. Because there really is no way to try and put together a linkage of brain creating consciousness, because that's not how it works. So what this is really all about is going back to first principles. René Descartes, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. Well, he kind of had it right, but he in many ways led us down a wrong pathway there. And I would say that dualism, the idea that there is the brain and there's the mind, they seem to work in parallel, and yet no one seems to understand the exact relationship. That dualism is a stepping stone. It cannot possibly be the answer. Because there's one truth, there's one nature of reality. And that is what I think we are here to try and discover. Now, it turns out I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and like many others of that generation, I always knew that science is the pathway to truth. I'm more of a scientist now than I've ever been. But I also realize that reductive materialism, that simplistic materialist science that I had come to worship over many decades of working as an academic neurosurgeon, including 15 years at Harvard Medical School, that science is kindergarten level. And in fact, all you need to do is find out a little bit more about consciousness, and you'll start to realize that impossible problem of consciousness, not just the hard problem. And it's impossible if you're trying to fit it all into a physicalist view of the universe. So then the question becomes, okay, René Descartes, I think therefore I am. If there is mind and there is matter, how do we get deeper into the way the universe really works? And I think to go there, it's important to point out that science that I worship, I do not use that phrase lightly, because I would say that reductive materialism in our conventional science is a faith-based religion that has less to support it than some of the faith-based religions. And when I say that, what I really mean is the idea that the physical brain creates the illusion of consciousness. That's where we really have it all wrong. And that is something that I subscribed to before my coma. I thought, well, we just haven't done enough work. We need to study it harder, and sooner or later, when we understand enough about the brain, we will come to understand how the brain creates consciousness. Now, there are many in that field of kind of conventional science and philosophy who take it much further, like Daniel Dennett at Tufts, a philosopher who would very proudly tell you, none of us are conscious. We're all zombies. And what they're saying there, what the thinking is that the physical brain has subatomic particles that follow the natural laws of physics. And then, of course, the atoms and molecules follow the laws of chemistry. And if you assume that the whole thing is just one great big physical chemical system, then you can understand why they would say, well, of course, consciousness is an illusion. It's an epiphenomenon of the workings of all those subatomic particles following natural laws. But if you think that consciousness is real in that setting, or if you think that a human being has free will, forget it. There's absolutely no way that can exist. The free will goes out the window because this illusion of consciousness is just those subatomic particles following natural laws. And it's nothing more than that. That's why it would be considered just an illusion of the physical workings of the brain. So they try and dismiss it completely. No such thing. They are being sucker punched by that supreme illusion. By the fact that they think that what they're witnessing out there is reality as it exists. And yet the beautiful gift of quantum mechanics is what it's been trying to tell us for 115 years, is that there is no reality out there independent of the mind, of consciousness, of the observer. And that in fact, consciousness is fundamental. That's a much better way to look at the data and try and make sense of the empirical environment in which we find ourselves. But the thing is, one then has to make that complete flip, which is something that I've been working on doing ever since my coma back in 2008. And that is realizing that the only thing any human being has ever witnessed is the inside of their own consciousness. The infinite consciousness, That is the theme of this conference, and that is what I believe we all can have access to. It's by going within. And once you realize the physical brain is not the producer of consciousness, and that in fact we are conscious in spite of our brain, you can start to see how going into consciousness, especially into extraordinary states of transcendental consciousness, can allow us to know much more about the workings of this universe, of our relationship with it, and how we are really one, not only with each other and with this universe, but with the divine creative source itself.
Okay, it gives me huge pleasure to introduce to you our next speaker, which is Pier. He's come all the way from Amsterdam for this, so I'm very excited to hear his presentation. I'm sure he can tell you a little bit about his own background, but what I do know is he's a cardiologist, and he has studied in quite some depth near-death experience with survivors of cardiac arrest. And he's also published many articles and has sold a lot, thousands of your book. And it's not just over 1 million. Quarter of a million. That's very, very impressive. Endless consciousness for those who want to read his work. Really looking forward to finding out what he's discovered in his research and what we can learn from it. And I'm very excited to have you here, so welcome.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased that I get the opportunity to discuss here today my concept of non-local consciousness based on scientific research on near-death experiences in survivors of cardiac arrest. And near-death experience, or an NDE as we heard this morning already, or an experience of enhanced consciousness during a period of apparent coma, still give rise to many unbelieving and critical questions, especially by physicians and neuroscientists. But as already 1 century ago William James has said, to study the abnormal is the best way of understanding the normal. How can it scientifically be explained that people can have clear memories from a period of obvious unconsciousness? Or how is it possible that permanent life changes occur after cardiac arrest of only 2 minutes? And NDE is the unforgettable confrontation with the unlimited dimensions of our consciousness. And as long as one not has experienced an NDE himself, it seems impossible to really understand the impact and the life-changing after effects of this overwhelming experience. According to these studies, the current materialistic view of the relationship between the brain and consciousness held by most physicians, philosophers, and psychologists is too restrictive for a proper understanding of this phenomenon. Materialistic science starts principally from a reality that is only based on physical, observable data. But we should be aware that besides external and so-called objective perception and observation, there are also subjective, not observable and not emotional aspects like thoughts, feelings, inspiration, and intuition. We can only measure the electrical, magnetic, chemical activities in the brain by EEG, MEG, and PET scan. We can measure changes in blood flow in the brain by fMRI. But these are only neural correlates of consciousness. These measurements do not explain anything about the production nor about the content of consciousness. With our currently available scientific and objective techniques, one is not able to even prove, measure, nor objectify the content of the subjective experiences in our consciousness. Direct proof about how neurons or neuronal networks could possibly produce the subjective essence of our thoughts and feelings is totally missing. By making a scientific case for consciousness as a non-local and thus ubiquitous phenomenon, this view can contribute to new ideas about the relationship between consciousness and the brain. Research on NDE questions the purely materialistic paradigm in science, and so it seems to be important for our scientific ideas about the mind-brain and mind-body relationship. It's also evident that it is important for our concepts about life and death because of the almost unavoidable conclusion that at the time of physical death, consciousness will continue to be experienced in another dimension in which past, present, and future is enclosed. Quote, death is only the end of our physical aspects. I believe now that death, like birth, may be mere passing from one state of consciousness into another. However, we should acknowledge that research of NDE cannot give us the irrefutable scientific proof to this conclusion, because people with NDE did not quite die. But they all were very close to death and without a functioning brain. So it has indeed been scientifically proven that during NDE, enhanced consciousness was experienced independently of a functioning brain. And quoting from a recent death announcement, all what you have fails into decay, but what you are lives on beyond time and space. So we have a body and we are conscious. Without a body, we still can have conscious experiences. We still are conscious beings. Recently, someone with an NDE wrote to me, I can live without my body, but apparently my body cannot live without me. Based on scientific research on NDE, one cannot avoid the conclusion that endless consciousness has and always will exist independently from the body. There is no beginning, nor will there ever be an end to our consciousness. Our enhanced consciousness resides not in our brain and is not limited to our brain, because our consciousness is non-local. And our brain has a facilitating function, not a producing function to experience consciousness. Consciousness seems to be our essence. And once we leave our body, leave our physical world, we exist as pure consciousness beyond time and space, and are unfolded in pure, unconditional love.
Well, it now gives me enormous pleasure to introduce Jude Currivan, one of my favourite speakers. She always does a riveting talk on, and today it's about the holographic nature of the universe. She's a wonderful speaker, she's a wonderful lady, a wonderful friend. Jude Currivan.
So, information expressed entropically as space-time is basically how we experience the universe, and that is relativity theory, because within space-time the speed of light is a limit, and yet our entire universe is a unified, coherent entity. The first law restated allows our universe to exist, our universe of energy, matter to exist. The second law restated allows it to evolve so that we can experience time, we can experience causality within this construct of consciousness we call our universe. As space expands, which it needs to on this holographic informed model, it does mean it has to enable ever more experience, exploration, discovery, self-awareness to evolve. And what the exquisite nature of all of those factors playing in from the very beginning do is it's perfect to allow the emergence and evolution of ever more self-aware microcosms of consciousness within this universe-soul cycle. Now, by talking of our universe as being finite in space-time, my perception, my understanding, whatever, is that that is still within an infinite cosmic plenum. Literally all that is and has ever been and ever will be. But what this allows for is a perception of physical reality that actually is grounded but more than that, is consciousness exploring itself. Which means that there is no duality. This idea of how does mind arise from matter, there is no duality. Mind is matter. Matter is mind. Matter is an expression, an energetic, material expression of the informational flows of all-pervasive consciousness. We can do away with that perception now. We come to a monistic perception, but a monistic perception that, where we still are unique perspectives, where we still are unique microcosms of consciousness. Because as I said, the one thing that is very clear from our amazing diversity of life, of experience within our universe, is that consciousness is not boring. There is never a snowflake that's the same as another snowflake. Okay, at the basic level maybe of quarks, you have to have some commonality of quarks, electrons. But beyond that, the incredibly exquisite nature of the forces that play out, the informational flows that play out, allow for, don't just allow for, facilitate, actually insist on ever greater level of evolutionary awareness. And yet, within our own experiences, within our own understandings of causalities and explorations, we are all part of a coherent and unified entity called our universe soul. And universes in this perspective, and more I think astrophysicists are getting this, are like bubbles, are like beautiful out-breaths of Brahman that come, that live, that are born and live and die. And when we look at the reduction in star formation now, one of the latest estimates is that our universe will come to an end in tens of billions of years. So it might be a universe that lasts for 30 billion years. And there are ways that cosmologists are now understanding may bud off new universes. The centres of black holes may go into an intrinsic spin process when new universes are birthed off. And at the end of a universe's life, again, we're not sure how the consciousness of a universal experience comes back into the cosmic plenum. But just as when we pass, when Eben's near-death experience, you realise that our consciousness doesn't cease when we take off these clothes. It continues. And I've had many experiences of that myself. So our universe soul's experience perhaps just enriches the infinite cosmic plenum for other universes to take on and experience. Life after life after life after life. But on what a scale! On what a scale, and on what so many different levels of experience, and not just the humans, because one of the things that I get concerned about is this idea of if we're not observing something, does it exist? Yeah? Quantum experiments clearly show that, as I said earlier, when we observe something, when we access information from something, we realise it. That's in the lab. That's in our small scale stuff. We also know that from our supernormal experiences to a great degree, and synchronicities and all sorts of things. But we are we are microcosmic consciousnesses. Our entire universe soul is a group consciousness. We don't have to observe something. Our universe is always observing itself. Time is our universe thinking. Space is our universe breathing. We're along for the ride. We're crucial aspects, microcosmic uniquenesses, notes, universal notes, cosmic notes of this adventure, of this exploration.
So, a very warm welcome to Stephan Schwartz, another person I love listening to, and I've just finished reading his book, which I thoroughly recommend, Laws of Change. There's some really good, useful insights, and I've taken a lot from that book, Stephan. So looking forward to talk.
This conference was created by Professor Laszlo, basically about a new paradigm. So what all of this is suggesting is that our consciousness is having an effect on physical reality constantly. And that when people hold consciousness and hold conscious intention, things change. And that this idea of creating a new paradigm, at its core, is about changing consciousness. Not in an abstract, philosophical way, but having to do with specific physical choices. I've been looking at research, particularly in the last about 16 years, at how individuals and small groups change the course of history in a compassionate and life-affirming way. And what I discovered, and I've looked at 200 of these changes, social transformational changes, such as the one we have been discussing here all weekend. What I discovered was that the key to it was the individual choices people made, and that when they made them collectively, they changed consciousness throughout the world. At the Van Rensselaer Polytech Institute, they did a study to see how many people does it take to change a cohort's consciousness. And what they discovered was whether the cohort was big or small, that is, whether it was a group, a community, or a country. When 10% of the people had shifted in consciousness to accept it, that the whole cohort changed. Now, one of the most interesting things that I find about the near-death research was a point that Pim made, and that is that there are about 10 million people in the United States, about 4.2% of the population, and there's many tens of millions across the world, and that we are slowly building up to a number that will approximate 10%. And that even though we are still struggling with people fully comprehending what near-death experiences are, I think when we get to approximately 10% of the population, we're going to see a massive shift.
I think what you take along with you is not necessarily verbalized or verbalizable. For me, to tell you, it's a reconfirmation of a feeling of an awe. I mean, the deepest sentiment is always one of awe. We live in a world that is miraculous. In the sense in which I think Einstein meant when he said if there's two ways to live your life, as if everything is a miracle or as if nothing is. The old paradigm said nothing is a miracle, everything already that can be researched, can be discovered, has already been discovered, but a little left to just fill it in here and there. And it's all very understandable, it's all very plain. It's all basically more or less like the giant mechanism, like Jude has showed about all the clocks in the cosmos churning out their eternal harmonies. But this world is more like a miracle. It cannot be a random world. It's a highly conscious world. In fact, one of our projects is called the conscious world. But this world, in a very deep sense, is conscious because without an underlying intelligence, which is like the cosmic consciousness in an anthropomorphic circular formulation, not even the proton and the neutron can join together and could accept an electron around it. And not even an atom could, a hydrogen atom could make a molecule. Carbon molecule, and those couldn't join together to make complex molecules and then cells and crystals and organisms and biospheres and galaxies. It is all being held together, being guided, but what we must recognize without being too esoteric or anthropomorphic is by guided by force. which structures the randomness, the potential for doing anything goes, into something which says this is the way to go. And this sense of a miracle, of living in a living universe, in an intelligent universe, has been the guiding principle of all deep thought for thousands of years. The only questions that arose were at the beginning of the modern age, and with Descartes, and as you have shown, and the Newtons, and Darwin, and the continuation, not with them personally, but with their followers. The followers who thought it's better to make it as simple as possible, make some handy prescriptions, recipes, and an equation better, the more complex the equation, the more likely this to be true and to be impressive. And that's the way everything is. Okay? And that sterilized the world. It's made it simple, but made it also meaningless. Now, perhaps we even get to the point where we can not only think in terms of the originating force, the intelligence, but also the purpose. Also, maybe there is a deeper meaning attached to all what is happening. And this is a fantastically enticing thought. It's inspiring thought. Maybe we are part of a harmony that's unfolding in the world. Maybe that harmony has a meaning, and that maybe we can get a grasp, not a full decoding of it, but an understanding of what is that meaning that's emerging in the world. And the more conscious we are, the more we can participate in it. Certainly not a question of doing something artificial, creating the world, but in participating, facilitating, being part of an evolutionary process. If there is one thing that I've been constant in my own thinking over the past 40, 50 years even, is the belief in evolution. Evolution as an unfolding of something which there is, which is, and which comes to manifestation. And it's through our conscious mind we can participate in that manifestation. We can facilitate, we can accelerate it, we can make it come. And if that meaning is attaching to what the religions and the spiritual systems tell us, is a kind of a cosmic consciousness, then we are ourselves cosmic beings performing a cosmic role. Either thoughts from moment comes up, or close to midnight, or close to the end of an intense 2-day session also. But it's a good thing to go away with this, perhaps. At least it's how I go away with this. A reaffirmation that we are on the threshold of a new understanding, of a grasp of who we are, what our world is. And therefore, with this understanding, we can be a conscious and purposeful part. This is the ray of hope. And it's an eternal ray of hope, because it has always been there. But today, more important than ever, because we are very, very really at the cusp of a process which I describe as a bifurcation, a process which can even be up or be down. Either we exclude or break down. And we are surrounded by elements that show that we're moving toward a breakdown. And at the same time, the rise of this new consciousness, and the rise in science, at the edge of science, at the edge of science, the recognition that we can investigate this, that we can come to an understanding of it, and can be more conscious and conscious. You know, that is one of the most positive aspects that we have. Because with that kind of understanding spreading in the world, I think people will start realizing who we are and will begin to live up to it. There is together. I'm happy to devote the rest of the years that I have to my life to this cause and to satisfy both our instinct for understanding, for coherence, for meaning, and our instinct for self-preservation, for flourishing in this world in which we live. We try. I think we are on a good way, and I have no more say than to say a deepest thanks for all of you, for all of my colleagues who participated in this adventure. Thanks for having come. Let's stay together.